I'm Harper 32, driving through the dusk to my dad's 60th birthday dinner. The road hums under my tires, a winding ribbon of asphalt cutting through quiet suburbs, the sky bruised with purples and oranges. My hands grip the wheel, knuckles pale, the leather cool against my palms. A handmade scrapbook rests on the passenger seat, its cover soft from years of hope pages, filled with photos of Dad and me, sunlit lakes, fishing rods, his rare, unguarded smiles. I spent weeks crafting it, gluing memories, scribbling notes about our fishing trips, those fleeting days when his laughter felt like home. My sister Lila's always been the golden child, her charm a magnet pulling the family close, her voice the center of every room. I've lingered on the edges, yearning for a seat at their table, my heart a mix of longing and caution. Tonight I picture us clinking glasses, laughing, maybe healing the cracks that have grown between us. But there's a knot in my chest, a whisper of doubt about Lila's smile, the way it sharpens when I'm near like a blade catching light. I glance at the rearview mirror, my own eyes staring back, tired but flickering with hope. Have you ever walked into a family gathering, heart full of hope, but braced for a sting you can't name? Stay with me to hear how it unfolded. If this stirs something in you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I stepped into the restaurant, the clink of glasses and soft glow of chandeliers wrapping around me like a warm but fragile promise. The air carried the scent of roasted herbs, candle wax, and a hint of lavender from the centerpiece, an elegance that made my simple sundress feel out of place. My scrapbook felt heavy in my hands, its pages a labor of love, snapshots of Dad and me by the lake. My small hands gripping a fishing rod, his steady voice guiding me. The family table was a vision, crisp white linens, roses blooming in a crystal vase, and Lila holding court at the head, her silk blouse shimmering, her posture commanding. Her eyes flicked to me, cool and sharp, as I approached, my heart thudding like a drum in my chest. I smiled, forcing my voice steady despite the tremor. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, stepping toward him, my shoes soft against the polished floor. He stood, his hug quick, almost distracted, his cologne sharp with cedar, a scent I didn't know. He sank back into his chair, eyes already drifting to Lila, leaving me standing exposed. Her lips curved a smile that didn't reach her eyes, sharp as glass. "Nice of you to make it on time, Harper," she said, her voice sweet, but edged a blade wrapped in velvet. A few cousins chuckled, their eyes darting away, their laughter, a soft jab that stung my chest. I laughed it off, sliding into a seat near the table's edge, but my cheeks burned, the heat creeping down my neck like a flush of shame. I caught Marcus, Lila's new husband, whispering to her, his glance at me sharp, like I was an outsider he didn't trust. His tailored suit and easy grin made me feel smaller, my worn purse a clumsy weight beside me. I set the scrapbook down, its leather grounding me, but my fingers lingered, nervous, tracing its edges as if it could hold me together. The waiter poured wine, the ruby liquid catching the chandelier light, and I tried to join the chatter, asking my cousin Tessa about her new teaching job, her classroom full of noisy kids. My voice felt thin, like it might break, but I pushed on, hoping to weave myself into the moment. Lila cut in, her voice louder, brighter, recounting a story about Dad's promotion years ago, one I'd heard a dozen times but never lived, her words painting a family I wasn't part of. Everyone leaned in, captivated, their laughter, warm, exclusive, a circle I couldn't enter. I sipped my water, the glass cold against my lips, feeling the table's energy pull away like a tide, leaving me stranded. Aunt Nora, Dad's older sister, sat across from me, her eyes soft but knowing, like she'd seen this dance before, her silver bracelet glinting as she stirred her coffee. She leaned forward, murmuring, "You look nice tonight, Harper," her voice a quiet anchor. Her words were small but steady, a thread I clung to in the storm. I glanced at Dad, hoping he'd notice me, his eyes catching mine for a moment, but he was laughing at Lila's story. His face lit up in a way I hadn't seen since I was a kid, when we'd share ice cream after fishing. My stomach twisted, a mix of longing and doubt, a fear that I'd misread the invitation's warmth. I tried again, clearing my throat, my voice a little louder. "Dad, remember when we used to..." Lila's laugh sliced through sharp and bright, stopping me cold. "Oh, Harper, let's not bore everyone with old stories," she said, her tone playful, but her eyes cold, pinning me in place like a butterfly on a board. Marcus smirked, his teeth flashing, and a few others shifted their discomfort, a fleeting shadow across the table. My words caught in my throat, and I felt the room shrink, the chandeliers dimming in my mind, their light no longer warm. I looked down at the scrapbook, its leather cover worn from my nervous grip, and wondered if I'd been wrong to think tonight could be different, that I could belong. Aunt Nora's gaze met mine again, steady like a lifeline. But Lila's words pressed harder. A weight I couldn't shake, a doubt that whispered I'd never fit here. The table hummed with conversation, but I felt like a ghost, my voice swallowed by the clatter of forks and Lila's effortless charm. I adjusted my napkin, its crisp fold a small distraction. My fingers brushing the scrapbook, its edges worn from years of holding on to memories. I wanted to share something small to bridge the gap with Dad. Maybe the time we stayed out late counting stars by the lake. His voice soft as he named constellations, but every time I opened my mouth, Lila's stories drowned me out. She was recounting a family vacation to the coast, one I hadn't been invited to, her words painting a picture of a perfect family, all laughter and sunsets that didn't include me. Dad nodded along, his smile wide, oblivious to the way my chest tightened, each breath a little harder to draw, like the air was thinning. I caught Tessa's eye, hoping for an ally, but she looked down, picking at her salad, her fork scraping softly, her silence a quiet betrayal. Then it happened. A waiter balancing a tray of drinks stumbled near me, and a glass of red wine splashed across the tablecloth, just missing my dress. The stains spread like a wound, dark and jagged, and Lila's laugh rang out sharp and quick, cutting through the chatter. "Careful, that's Harper's side of the table," she said, her tone light, but cutting a knife disguised as a joke. The table erupted in chuckles, even Dad's low rumble joining in, a sound I used to chase but now felt like a slap. My face burned and I forced a smile, my lips trembling, but inside I was crumbling, my heart, a fragile thing breaking apart. Marcus leaned back, his smirk wider now, like he was in on some private joke I'd never understand, his eyes glinting with amusement. I wanted to disappear, to slip out the door and leave the scrapbook behind, but my feet stayed planted, rooted by a stubborn hope I couldn't shake. Aunt Nora's hand brushed mine under the table, her fingers squeezing gently, warm and steady, a small act of defiance against the room's tide. She slid a folded napkin toward me, and when I opened it, her neat handwriting read, "You're enough." My throat tightened, a lump I couldn't swallow, and I tucked the note into my pocket, clinging to its warmth like a shield against the cold. But Lila's voice pulled me back now, talking about Dad's old house, the one I'd spent hours helping him fix up, sanding floors until my hands ached, painting walls in the summer heat, my shirt sticking to my skin. She didn't mention me, not once, as if I'd never been there, my sweat never mingling with the sawdust, my laughter never echoing in those empty rooms. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to correct her, to say my name, to acknowledge those days we'd worked side by side, the radio playing old country tunes. But he just sipped his wine, his eyes distant, lost in her story, his silence a heavier weight than her words. I tried one last time, my voice softer than I meant, barely audible over the clink of glasses and the hum of voices. "Dad, I loved those weekends at the house," I said, my heart pounding, hoping he'd hear me. Lila's head tilted, her smile tight, almost pitying, like I was a child reaching for something out of grasp. "Oh, Harper, you were just tagging along," she said, her words landing like a slap, sharp and final. The table went quiet for a moment, the air thick with tension, forks, still eyes darting between us. I felt their gazes, pitying, curious, but no one spoke, their silence a wall I couldn't climb. My heart pounded and I gripped the scrapbook tighter, its pages a reminder of a bond I wasn't sure existed anymore. The room felt smaller, the laughter sharper, and I wondered if I'd ever been part of this family at all, or if I'd been fooling myself, chasing a place that was never mine, a dream that was slipping through my fingers. The restaurant buzzed around me, plates clinking, voices weaving into a hum that felt miles away, like I was underwater. I sat at the edge of the table, my fingers tracing the spine of the scrapbook, its weight no longer a comfort, but a reminder of how small I felt, how invisible. Lila was in her element, steering the conversation with stories of Dad's triumphs, her laughter pulling everyone in like a current I couldn't swim against. I took a breath, determined to be part of this, to find my footing in their circle. "Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "Your promotion back then was huge. I still remember you coming home so proud, telling me about it over dinner, just the two of us." Lila's eyes flicked to me, sharp and cold, like I'd stepped onto her stage uninvited. "Oh, he did so much for us," she said, her emphasis on us, like a wall shutting me out. Her voice smooth but barbed. Marcus leaned in, his voice low but loud enough to carry across the table. "Yeah, Lila's always been the one keeping things together." He said, his tone casual but pointed. A few cousins nodded their agreement, a quiet hum, and my stomach twisted, a knot tightening until it hurt to breathe. Dad just smiled, his gaze fixed on his plate, as if my words hadn't landed, as if I hadn't spoken at all. I noticed the watch on Lila's wrist, its familiar scratched face glinting under the chandelier, a timepiece I'd spent hours fixing for Dad years ago, my hands steady with a jeweler's tool, my heart full of hope that he'd wear it. See me remember. Now it was hers, a trophy on her wrist, and he hadn't said a word, hadn't even flinched. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, the taste of water sour on my tongue like regret. Tessa tried to shift the topic, her voice soft, asking about my freelance graphic design work, the logos I'd been sketching late into the night. But Lila cut in again, her tone bright and commanding, redirecting the table. "Let's talk about something interesting, like Dad's new project," she said, her words a gate slamming shut. The table followed her lead, their voices rising, laughing, and I felt the air thin like I was breathing through a straw, my lungs straining. Marcus chuckled, leaning back in his chair, his tie loosened. "Freelancing's cute, Harper, but Lila's out there closing deals," he said, his grin sharp, his words a jab that drew soft laughter from the others. The laughter wasn't cruel, but it stung like 1,000 needles, each one piercing deeper, drawing blood I couldn't show. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to say something, anything to pull me back into the circle, to acknowledge the daughter who'd sat across from him all those years ago, listening to his stories. But he just sipped his wine, his eyes avoiding mine, his silence a weight I couldn't lift, a betrayal that cut deeper than words. Aunt Nora's gaze met mine. Her lips pressed tight like she could feel the hurt radiating off me, her eyes a mirror of my own pain. I wanted to scream, to demand why I was always the one left out, why my efforts, my hours, my heart were invisible. But I stayed silent, my fingers digging into the scrapbook, its edges sharp against my skin, grounding me in my own pain. I caught my reflection in a polished silver tray nearby, eyes tired, jaw set, a woman I barely recognized fighting to be seen. The pain was building, sharp and relentless, a storm I couldn't outrun, and I wasn't sure how much more I could take before it broke me. The chatter around the table swelled, a tide pulling me further from shore, leaving me adrift. I sat there, my hands clenched in my lap, the scrapbook now a heavy anchor I couldn't lift its weight, a reminder of my fading place. Lila raised her glass, her voice commanding the room like a conductor, her presence a force that filled every corner. "To Dad, the best father to his real family," she said, her eyes skimming over me like I was air, her smile a polished mask. The word real sliced through me, sharp and deliberate, a blade meant to cut deep, to mark me as other. Glasses clinked, their crystal chime ringing in my ears, a sound that should have been warm but felt like ice. Dad's smile widened, but he didn't look my way. His eyes lost in the glow of her toast, his silence a confirmation of her words. My heart pounded, a dull ache spreading through my chest like a bruise blooming under my skin, heavy and raw. I forced myself to speak, my voice shaking, but clear, desperate to reclaim something, anything. "Dad, those fishing trips we took, they meant everything to me." I said, my words a lifeline to a past I still believed in. Lila's smirk flickered her head, tilting her eyes, glinting with something cruel like a predator sizing up prey. "Pity outings, Harper. He was just being nice," she said, her voice soft but venomous, each word a dart. The table froze, forks hovering eyes darting between us like spectators at a match, their silence deafening. My breath caught the room, tilting the chandelier light, blurring into a haze that stung my eyes. I searched Dad's face for a denial, a spark of the man who'd taught me to cast a line, who'd laughed when I hooked my first fish, his hand steady on my shoulder. But he just stared at his plate, his silence louder than any words, a confirmation that carved a hole in me. A photo on the restaurant wall caught my eye, a father and daughter fishing, their smiles frozen in time under a painted sunset, a scene so close to my memories it hurt to look at. It was like a mirror of my past now twisted into something hollow, a mockery of what I'd held dear. My throat burned, tears pricking, but I wouldn't let them fall, not here, not in front of her. Lila leaned back, her victory quiet but unmistakable, her posture relaxed, a queen on her throne, her kingdom unchallenged. Marcus murmured something to her, his laugh low and cruel, a sound that curled my stomach, made my hands tremble. Tessa shifted in her seat, her eyes apologetic, but she didn't speak, her silence another weight piling on. Aunt Nora's hand hovered near mine, her fingers trembling, but even her warmth couldn't dull the sting, couldn't fill the void opening inside me. I felt like I was sinking, the table's laughter a distant echo, their voices muffled by the roar in my head, a storm of hurt and betrayal. Every memory I'd held on to, every moment I thought defined me and Dad, our quiet mornings by the lake, the way he'd ruffle my hair, his voice soft with pride, felt like a lie, a story I'd told myself to survive. Lila's words echoed, each one a stone pressing me down, heavier, heavier, until I could barely breathe. I gripped the edge of my chair, my knuckles white, my nails digging into the wood, grounding me in my pain. The room felt like it was closing in the air, thick with a truth I couldn't escape. I wasn't part of their story, and maybe I never had been, just a ghost clinging to a past that didn't exist. Dessert plates arrived, their delicate clinks a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside me. The table glowed with candlelight, the flames flickering like they were mocking my fading hope, casting shadows that danced across the linens. Everyone leaned in as Dad prepared to open gifts, their faces bright with anticipation, their voices a soft buzz of excitement. My scrapbook sat in my lap, its pages a fragile hope. I still clung to each photo, a stitch in a wound I'd carried too long, each note a plea for connection. I stood, my hands trembling, my breath shallow, and offered it to him, my fingers brushing the worn leather. "Dad, this is for you," I said, my voice soft but steady, holding on to the dream that he'd see it, see me remember the girl by the lake. Lila's eyes narrowed, and before Dad could reach for it, she leaned forward, her smile tight, controlled, a gatekeeper barring my way. "Let's save the special gifts for last, Harper," she said, her tone dripping with authority, her words a wall I couldn't climb. The table murmured in agreement, their voices a soft chorus that drowned mine, and my stomach dropped a stone, sinking fast into a dark well. Lila slid a sleek box across the table, her gift to Dad, a luxury watch, its face gleaming under the lights like a polished lie, its ticking a taunt. Gasps rippled around the table, cousins whispering about its price, their eyes bright with awe, their voices a buzz that excluded me. Dad's face lit up, his hands cradling the box like it was treasure, his smile wide and unguarded, a joy I hadn't seen in years. My scrapbook felt like a child's drawing next to it, clumsy, insignificant, a relic no one wanted. I sank back into my chair, my throat tight, the room spinning, the candlelight blurring into a haze that stung my eyes. A little girl at a nearby table stared at me, her wide eyes full of something like pity, as if she could see the crack forming in my heart, the fracture widening with every second, every laugh. I tried to breathe, to hold on to the moment I'd imagined when Dad would open my gift, see our fishing trips inked on those pages, the lake water sparkling in memory, and remember the girl who'd sat by his side laughing as fish slipped away. But he didn't even glance my way, his fingers tracing the watch's edges, lost in Lila's offering, in her version of love. Lila's voice filled the silence, directing everyone's attention to her gift, her story, her family, her words, a script that wrote me out entirely. Tessa's foot nudged mine under the table, a quiet apology, but it wasn't enough, not against this tide that was pulling me under. Aunt Nora's face was tight. Her hands folded too neatly like she was holding back words she couldn't say. Her eyes full of a sorrow that mirrored mine, a shared pain across the table. My chest burned, the weight of being invisible crushing me, a pressure I couldn't shake, couldn't breathe through. Was this what I'd driven hours for, what I'd poured my heart into that scrapbook? For to be erased again, to be nothing in their eyes. The laughter around the table swelled, a wave crashing over me as Lila basked in her moment, her voice a melody. Everyone followed her presence, a sun they orbited. My scrapbook lay untouched, a silent weight in my lap, its pages curling slightly from the warmth of my hands, each one a memory I'd thought would matter. Then Lila's voice cut through, sharp and deliberate, a blade aimed at my core. "Sorry, Harper, this table's for family only," she said, pointing to a rickety fold-out chair by the trash can, its metal frame glinting coldly in the dim light, its legs uneven on the floor. The table erupted in laughter, cousins and aunts, joining in their voices, a blur of amusement that echoed in my ears like a taunt. My face burned, my heart hammering, as I stood, legs unsteady, and walked to the chair, each step heavier than the last, the floor hard beneath my feet. The chair creaked loudly as I sat, the sound piercing the room, drawing more chuckles, sharp and careless, like needles pricking my skin. The smell of discarded food hit me sour and thick, mingling with the restaurant's warmth, a cruel contrast to the polished table I'd left behind. Dad's eyes flicked to me, a fleeting glance, then away, his silence louder than the laughter. A confirmation of my place outside their circle, outside their family. Marcus leaned toward Lila, his whisper carrying a smug edge, his eyes glinting with amusement like he'd won something. A waiter hesitated nearby, his face flushed with secondhand shame, his tray trembling slightly, his eyes avoiding mine. Aunt Nora rose, her chair scraping the floor, her breath catching, but she sat back down, her hands trembling, her eyes locked on mine with a helpless sorrow that mirrored my own. Tessa's gaze dropped, her fork still. Her silence a weight I felt in my bones, heavy and cold. I stared at the table, their joy a distant hum, my chest hollowed out, a void where hope used to be. I clutched the scrapbook, its edges digging into my palms, but it felt like nothing now, a relic of a bond that didn't exist, a dream I'd clung to too long. The little girl from the nearby table was gone, her absence a quiet mirror of my own, her empty chair a ghost of my place here. The laughter faded, but the sting didn't, each chuckle a nail in the coffin of my belonging, each smile a reminder of my exclusion. Lila's smirk lingered, a quiet triumph, as the room spun around me. The chandelier light, harsh and unforgiving, casting shadows that seemed to mock me. I was outside their circle, their family, their world, sitting by a trash can in a chair that screamed my irrelevance. My breath came shallow, my heart a bruised thing, and I wondered if I could ever climb out of this moment, this chair, this pain that felt like it would swallow me whole, leaving nothing behind but the echo of their laughter. I sat in that fold-out chair, the cold metal biting into my thighs, the hum of the family table, a distant roar in my ears like a tide I couldn't swim. My scrapbook lay in my lap, its pages heavy with memories no one seemed to want, each one a piece of me I'd offered up in vain, a heart laid bare. The waiter approached, his face apologetic, his hands unsteady as he held a leather folder with the bill, $4,900 scrawled in neat ink, a number that felt like a judgment. His eyes met mine, assuming I'd take it like I always had for family gatherings, my wallet open to keep the peace, to prove I belonged. Lila's gaze flicked to me, expectant, her lips curling slightly as if she knew I'd bend, as if she'd already won. Something snapped inside me, a quiet fire igniting steady and sure, a spark I hadn't felt before. I looked at the waiter, my voice calm but firm, cutting through the hum like a blade. "Not my table," I said, sliding the folder back across the table, my hands steady despite the storm inside. The room stilled, forks pausing, mid-air, glasses hovering the air thick with shock. Lila's smile froze her eyes, narrowing a crack in her polished facade, her control slipping. Marcus shifted, his chuckle dying in his throat, his hand twitching on the table, his confidence unraveling. I felt the weight of every stare, but for the first time it didn't crush me. It lifted me. made me taller. I reached into my purse, pulling out a folded letter I'd written to Dad months ago, never sent, its creases worn from nights of doubt, its words a map of my pain. My hands shook, but I stood my chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood, a sound that echoed my resolve, a declaration that I was done being invisible. Tessa's eyes widened, a spark of encouragement in them, her fingers tightening on her glass, her breath held. Aunt Nora's fingers tightened on her napkin, her nod subtle but steady, a quiet strength I leaned into like a lifeline. I unfolded the letter, my heart pounding but sure, its words a rope pulling me out of the dark. Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade, clear and unwavering. I need you to hear this. Lila opened her mouth, her eyes flashing with panic, but I didn't stop, didn't waver. I was done letting her erase me, done being the shadow at their table, done begging for a place I'd never been given. The words in my hands felt like a lifeline, a way to claim my place, not in their circle, but in my own story, my own truth. I took a breath, ready to read, ready to be heard, the restaurant fading around me as I stood taller than I ever had, my voice a fire that wouldn't be doused. My voice trembled but didn't break as I began reading the letter, each word a stone I'd carried too long, heavy, but finally free. Dad, I've spent years trying to be enough for you, for this family, but every time I reach out, I'm pushed away. I said, my words spilling into the silence, raw and unfiltered. The restaurant faded, the clatter of plates gone, the chandelier light dimming, just my voice filling the space, steady and raw. I spoke of the nights I stayed up wondering why I wasn't enough, the times I fixed things for him, his watch, his house, his broken shelves, hoping he'd see me, hold on to me, call me his daughter. I spoke of the quiet moments I'd cherished, the ones I thought we shared, now buried under Lila's stories, rewritten as hers. Lila's chair scraped, her voice sharp, cutting through my words. Harper, you're making a scene, she said, her tone desperate, like she was losing her grip. I didn't stop, my eyes locked on Dad's, willing him to hear me, to see me. I looked at him, his eyes wide, hands still on the luxury watch box, its gleam a stark contrast to my worn letter, its creases a map of my heart. I love you, but I'm tired of begging for a place here. I said, my voice steady now, a quiet strength I hadn't known I had rising like a tide. A server paused near the table, her eyes glistening, her tray forgotten, as if my words had reached her own hidden wounds, her own silent battles. Tessa's hand rested on the table, her nod urging me on, a silent ally in the storm, her presence a warmth I clung to. I read the final lines, my heart laid bare. I deserve to be seen, Dad, not as a guest, not as an afterthought, but as your daughter. The room was silent, the weight of my truth settling like dust, heavy and undeniable, a truth that couldn't be ignored. Lila's face twisted, her words ready to strike, but I met her gaze unflinching, my heart pounding, but sure, my eyes steady. Marcus muttered something, his confidence cracking his voice, a low mumble that faded fast, his swagger gone. Aunt Nora's eyes shone with quiet pride, her fingers still clutching her napkin, her silence a support I felt in my bones, a strength that held me up. I folded the letter, my hands steady now, and set it beside Dad's plate, next to the untouched scrapbook, its pages a testament to a love I'd given freely. I didn't need his response, not anymore. Didn't need his validation to know my worth. The air felt lighter, like I'd shed a skin. I'd outgrown a weight I'd carried too long. I stood there, not at their table, but in my own space. My voice finally mine, my heart finally free. My eyes locked on Dad's, and in that moment, I wasn't asking for his love. I was claiming my own, standing tall in a room that had tried to shrink me, a woman who wouldn't be erased. The silence after my letter hung heavy like the air before a storm breaks thick with unspoken truths. My words had spilled out raw and unfiltered, and now the table was a frozen tableau, the candlelight flickering uncertainly, casting long shadows across the linens. Dad's hands rested on the luxury watch box, his fingers still, his eyes locked on the folded letter beside my scrapbook, its edges worn from my grip. I stood there, my heart pounding but steady. The weight of years lifted just enough to let me breathe, to let me stand. Then he spoke. his voice low, cracked, almost lost in the quiet, each word heavy with a regret I hadn't expected. "Harper, I didn't realize how much I let you down," he said, his eyes glistening, catching the light. For a moment I saw the man who'd taught me to tie a fishing knot, who'd stood by me as the lake rippled, his hands steady, not the one who'd let Lila rewrite our story. His words were a thread, fragile but real, and they hit me hard, a mix of relief and lingering ache, a wound that was still raw but starting to heal. Lila's face twisted, her voice cutting through the stillness like a whip, sharp and desperate. "You're ruining his night, Harper. Always so dramatic," she said, her words lacking their usual bite, like she was scrambling to regain control, her throne shaking. Marcus leaned towards her, his hand on her arm, but his eyes darted nervously, his usual swagger gone, his voice a mumble that didn't land. The cousins shifted their plates untouched. Their earlier whispers silenced their discomfort, palpable in the heavy air. Tessa's gaze was steady, a quiet strength in her nod, like she was rooting for me from the sidelines. Her presence a small light in the dark. Aunt Nora's lips parted, her breath catching, but she stayed silent, her hands clasped tight, her eyes full of a sorrow and pride I could feel across the table, a connection that held me up. A photograph slipped from the scrapbook, fluttering to the table, a faded shot of me and Dad by the lake, my small hands holding a fish, his smile wide, unguarded, the sun setting behind us. It landed face up, its colors soft in the candlelight, and Dad's breath caught a sound so small it nearly broke me, a crack in his armor. The room felt smaller, the chandelier light harsher, as if it exposed every crack in this family, every moment we'd let slip, every truth we'd buried. My chest ached, not with the old hurt, but with a strange relief, like I'd finally been seen, even if just for a moment. I'd spoken my truth, and it had shifted something, cracked the facade they'd built. The waiter hovered nearby, the bill still untouched, a silent wait at the table's center, a question no one wanted to answer. I felt every eye on me, waiting for what came next, but I wasn't sure I owed them anything more, not after giving so much. The waiter cleared his throat, sliding the bill folder toward the center of the table, its $4,900 total, a quiet accusation in the tense air, a number that hung like a judgment. Lila's eyes flicked to it, then to me, her jaw tight, her fingers twitching, her control slipping. She'd expected me to pay, like always, my wallet a silent offering to keep the family's peace, to prove I belonged even when they pushed me out. But this time her confidence wavered, her eyes betraying a flicker of doubt, a crack in her armor. She reached for her purse, her movements sharp, almost frantic, and slapped a credit card down on the folder, the sound sharp in the quiet. "Fine," she muttered, her voice brittle like glass, about to crack, her facade crumbling under the weight of my words. Marcus mumbled something about splitting it, his voice low and uncertain, his hand hovering awkwardly, but the cousins stayed silent, their eyes on their plates, their earlier laughter gone, replaced by a tension that pressed against my skin. Dad's hand hovered over the photograph, his fingers brushing its edge, but he didn't pick it up, as if touching it would make the past too real, would force him to face what he'd let slip. His apology lingered in the air, but his silence now felt heavier, like he was grappling with years he couldn't undo, a truth he couldn't fully face. I stepped back, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, each sound a declaration of my own strength. I set the scrapbook gently by his side, its pages a quiet offering. I no longer needed him to accept a gift I'd given for me as much as for him. "Keep it," I said, my voice low, final. A door closing softly but firmly. I didn't need his reaction anymore, didn't need his validation to know my worth, to know I was enough. Tessa's phone buzzed, and she glanced at me, her text lighting up. "I'm proud of you." It was a small anchor, a thread of connection that steadied me in the storm. Lila stormed out, her heels sharp against the floor, each step a punctuation of her defeat, her control shattered. Marcus trailed behind, his shoulders slumped, his usual confidence unraveling his steps, hesitant. The table sat frozen, the bill paid, the party over the candlelight dimming as if it knew the night was done. I turned to leave, my heart steady, but bruised, the weight of their eyes following me, heavy but no longer crushing. I'd broken their script, shattered the illusion they'd built. and now the room held its breath, waiting for something I didn't owe them. My steps echoed as I walked toward the door, the world outside calling me to a quieter truth, a place where I could stand without begging for a seat, a place where I was enough. A week later, I sat on my apartment's worn couch, the morning light spilling through a cracked window, painting soft shadows on the scuffed hardwood floor. The quiet felt new, like a gift I hadn't unwrapped before, a space where I could hear my own thoughts uncluttered by their noise. My phone buzzed, Dad's name lighting up the screen, and my heart skipped a mix of hope and caution, a dance I was still learning. I hesitated, my thumb hovering my breath, catching, then answered, my voice soft, tentative. He asked to meet, his tone fragile, like he was afraid I'd say no, like he was carrying his own weight now. We chose a park near my place, a small one with a pond where kids tossed bread to ducks, their laughter a gentle hum in the distance, their voices bright against the morning air. I arrived first, my sneakers crunching on gravel, the air crisp with early spring, carrying the scent of wet grass and blooming trees, a freshness that felt like a beginning. Dad showed up, his coat loose, his steps slower than I remembered, his face etched with lines I hadn't noticed before, like time had carved its own story. We sat on a bench, the pond rippling before us, its surface catching the sunlight in soft glints, a quiet beauty I hadn't noticed in years. "I've been thinking about your letter," he said, his eyes on the water, his voice low, like he was speaking to himself as much as to me. "I let things slip, Harper. I let Lila take over, and I didn't see you, didn't fight for you." His words were heavy, honest, but they didn't erase the years, didn't fill the holes left by his silence, didn't mend the cracks overnight. I nodded, my hands folded in my lap, my fingers tracing the seam of my jeans, feeling the ache but also something softer, like a bruise starting to heal a pain that was fading. A duckling waddled near its tiny feet, fearless on the grass, its small body darting toward the water, full of purpose. It reminded me of simpler days, not fishing, at moments when I felt whole, like when I'd ride my bike to the library, losing myself in books while Dad worked late, the pages a refuge where I could be enough. I told him I wasn't ready to pretend everything was fixed, that trust wasn't a switch I could flip, but I'd try to meet him halfway, one step at a time, one call at a time. He reached for my hand, his grip warm but tentative, his fingers rough from years of work, a texture I remembered from childhood. Tessa texted, then inviting me to a dinner with just her and a few cousins. No expectations, no Lila. Just a table where I could belong, where laughter wasn't a weapon. I smiled, the idea of a new kind of family settling in me, warm and possible, a seed taking root. I wasn't there yet, but I could feel the ground steadying beneath me, a foundation I was building myself brick by brick. Back in my apartment, I pulled out a notebook, its pages blank but inviting, their white expanse a canvas for something new, a story I could write myself. I started writing, not about the dinner or Lila's sharp words, but about me, what I wanted, who I was outside their table, outside their story, outside their approval. My pen moved slowly, tracing thoughts I hadn't dared name before. I am enough, I am whole, I am not their shadow. I wrote about the dreams I'd shelved, the designs I'd sketched, but never shared the life I could build if I stopped waiting for their permission. I framed the old photo of me and Dad by the lake, its edges creased but warm, a reminder not of loss, but of what I'd carried through, what I'd built from those moments, what I could still become. My phone lit up with Lila's text, a clipped apology that felt more like obligation than heart words, thrown out to save face, not to heal. I read it, let it sit for a moment, my thumb hovering, then set the phone down. No reply needed, no energy owed to her anymore. I found an old fishing lure in a drawer, its feathers faded but intact, a gift Dad gave me when I was 12, back when his smile felt like a promise, when his hand on my shoulder felt like home. I held it, smiling at its quiet weight, its soft colors catching the light of my lamp, a small piece of the past I could keep without pain. Aunt Nora called, her voice steady, warm, sharing her own stories of family fights she'd walked away from, of moments she'd chosen herself over the noise, her words a bridge to a new kind of belonging. Her stories wrapped around me, a soft tether to something new, a family not bound by blood, but by choice, by understanding. I sat back, the notebook open, the lure in my hand, and felt the world settle, its edges softer now, its weight lighter. I wasn't whole yet, but I was building something real, something mine, a life where I didn't need their table to feel seen, a life where I was enough for myself. Months later, I found myself at a small lake, the kind tucked away where the city fades, its edges wild with reeds and birdsong, its quiet a balm I'd come to crave. I sat on a weathered dock, a cheap fishing rod in hand, the water lapping softly against the wood, a rhythm that matched my breath, steady and slow. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, a freshness that cleared my head, and I was alone. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom, like a space I'd carved for myself. I'd started coming here most weekends, not to catch anything, but to sit with myself, to listen to the quiet I'd spent years running from, to hear the thoughts I'd drowned in their noise. Dad and I had been talking, more short calls that felt awkward but honest, like we were learning each other again, peeling back years of silence, one word at a time, one story at a time. I cast my line, watching the bobber drift, its red tip bobbing gently on the water, catching the sunlight in small flashes. Tessa had started inviting me to her place for Sunday dinners, just a few of us laughing over burned casseroles and old music, our voices filling her small dining room with a warmth I hadn't known I needed. Aunt Nora joined, sometimes her stories about her own fights for respect grounding me, her laughter, a thread that wove us closer. A family built on choice, not obligation. I wasn't rushing to fix everything with Dad, wasn't trying to erase the past or paint it perfect. I was just showing up, letting the moments build slowly like stones in a riverbed, steady and sure. The lake shimmered its surface, catching the afternoon light, and I felt a quiet shift, like I was finally standing on my own ground, my roots sinking deep, my heart finding its place. A fish tugged my line, small and quick, its silver body flashing in the sunlight, before I released it back into the lake, its ripples fading fast into the water's calm. I smiled, not because I'd caught it, but because letting it go felt right, like shedding a weight I no longer needed, a resentment I'd carried too long. I'd stopped waiting for Dad to fill the gaps. In my heart, stopped chasing Lila's approval, or a seat at a table that was never mine, stopped measuring my worth by their eyes. I'd started painting again, small canvases in my apartment colors, spilling out like truths I'd held back too long, blues for the late, golds for the mornings, I'd reclaimed reds for the fire I'd found in myself. Those Sunday dinners with Tessa and Aunt Nora weren't perfect, but they were real, built on laughter and honesty, not competition or control, not the need to prove anything. I learned something that night at Dad's party, and it's carried me here, to this dock, this lake, this moment. Family isn't a table you're invited to. It's the people who see you, who stay when you're messy, who hold space for your truth, who choose you back. I forgave Dad not because he earned it, but because I deserved peace, a heart unburdened by resentment, a life unchained from their story. I chose myself, and that choice set me free. Let me stand taller than any table ever could. Let me breathe in a way I hadn't before. What's a moment that made you redefine family? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to spread this journey. Thank you for listening, and here's to finding your own peace wherever you are.